In this video, I'm going to show you 6 situations where a Roth conversion doesn't make sense so that you don't end up paying a large tax bill today for a strategy that never actually improves your retirement plan. Roth conversions are one of the most recommended strategies in retirement planning. You pay the tax now, you avoid taxes later, and you get tax-free growth and tax-free withdrawals. And sometimes it works out well, but in and of itself, that's not a complete strategy. It's just a very simplified idea because a Roth conversion involves a trade-off. You choose to pay the tax today in exchange for a potential benefit later on. And that trade only works out if it clearly improves the outcome of your plan over time. And if it doesn't, you're not really optimizing anything. You're just accelerating your taxes without creating a real benefit. That's exactly what you want to avoid. But first, I'm Justin Haywood. I'm a certified financial planner, and I've helped hundreds of people retire with confidence, and I want to help you do the same. So without further ado, here are 6 situations where a Roth conversion may actually work against you. The first situation is when there's no clear objective behind the conversion. There's just this general belief that Roth is better, so you decide to convert. And that's where people get into trouble because every major decision in retirement should have a job, especially Roth conversions. The job might be reducing future RMD pressure or smoothing out your income over time, but if the conversion doesn't clearly accomplish a specific goal, then what are we actually doing? Because in that case, you're probably just accelerating taxes today without creating a meaningful benefit down the line. And sometimes the better decision is just to do nothing or do less and allow tax laws to evolve, the market to move, and allow your situation to become clear. The second situation is when you're converting during a high income year. And this is a pretty common mistake that I've seen, especially for people that are going through a major financial event. Think about years where income is already elevated. Maybe you sold a business or you sold a piece of real estate, or maybe you had a large capital gain or exercised some stock options. During those years, your income is already unusually high. Now, if you add a Roth conversion on top of that, you're stacking even more income onto your highest tax bracket. Let's say you already have $400,000 of taxable income in a year. If you add another $150,000 of a conversion on top of that, that entire conversion will be taxed at 32 or even 35%. And at that point, that's probably the highest tax bracket you'll ever face. So you're better off being patient and allowing these high income years to pass. Then in the years that follow, especially after retirement, before you start RMDs or Social Security, you might have significantly lower income, and that is the best window to actually look at doing a conversion when you're in a more favorable tax environment. Because with Roth conversions, when you do it matters just as much as how much you do. The third situation is assuming that your future tax rates will be higher than they are today. There's a common assumption that tax rates in the future are going to be higher than they are now. And that's often used as the main justification for doing Roth conversions now. But that's not always how it plays out, because what matters isn't whether tax rates go up broadly, it's whether your tax rate will be higher today or later on. And in many cases, it's actually the opposite. Think about someone in their early 60s who's still working. They're in a higher income bracket today because they're earning a salary, but once they retire, that income will disappear. And before Social Security begins and before RMDs begin, there might be a window of several years, 5 to 8 years or so, where your taxable income will be significantly lower. And that can be a really good window to look at doing a Roth conversion. But if you convert too early, let's say while you're still working and in a higher tax bracket, you'll probably end up paying more tax than necessary. And the same idea applies to someone who expects large deductions in the future. Maybe they plan to make charitable gifts, or maybe in the future they'll have some significant medical expenses. So the question isn't, will tax rates go up? It's, will my tax rate be higher later than it is right now? And if the answer is a no, a Roth conversion today may not make sense. The fourth situation is when the conversion creates hidden income side effects. This is where Roth conversions start interacting with other parts of the tax system, not just your tax bracket. Most people think about conversions in isolation, but income impacts more than just what tax bracket you're in. It can affect your Medicare premiums. It can change how much of your Social Security is taxed. And it can trigger phase-outs of certain deductions or credits. So the real cost of a conversion is often higher than it appears on the surface. For example, let's say you have a retired couple who are both 68. They're both receiving Social Security and drawing a little bit of money from their retirement portfolio. On paper, they're in a 22% tax bracket. So they decide to convert $120,000 to Roth. At first glance, this might look fine, but that additional income pushes them over a Medicare IRMAA threshold, and now 2 years later, their Medicare premiums will increase by several $1,000s per year. So the true cost of that conversion wasn't just the tax they paid. It was the tax plus the higher Medicare premiums. And that's the part that most people miss. This doesn't mean that Roth conversions are a bad idea. It just means that they need to be sized carefully. And in many cases, the optimal strategy is converting right up to a threshold but not crossing it. The fifth issue is when the timeline just isn't long enough for the conversion to pay off. And this is one of the most overlooked parts of Roth conversions. When you convert, you're paying a tax bill today in exchange for benefits that show up years down the road. And those benefits take time to accrue. So let's say that you convert $150,000 today and you're in the 22% tax bracket. Right now, you'll pay $33,000 to the IRS in tax. It's gone immediately. So for that decision to work, the tax-free growth inside the Roth has to eventually recover that $33,000 and then surpass it. And that doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. Now, if you're 58 and that money stays invested for 25 to 30 years, the math can work really well. But if you're 72, the timeline changes dramatically. In many cases, the break-even point can be 10 to 15 years into the future. So the question becomes, will the money actually stay invested long enough to benefit? So if you're 70 and you need the money in 6 to 7 years down the line, the strategy won't have enough time to work. The compounding never has a chance to do its job. Now, that doesn't mean that Roth conversions later in life are never a good idea. Sometimes they're done for legacy purposes to take advantage of the maybe lower tax rates that you have compared to what your children will have when they inherit the money. But if legacy isn't the goal, the conversion has to make sense within your own lifetime. And in some cases, the timeline just isn't long enough to justify the upfront tax. The final issue I see is when you don't have a clear way to pay the tax on the conversion. And this is a really common problem, again, that I see over and over. Someone decides they want to do a Roth conversion, but they haven't really thought about how the tax bill will actually be paid. Imagine you're in your early 60s and you have $3 million in traditional retirement accounts. Outside of that, maybe you have $75,000 in cash and $150,000 in a brokerage account. You might think, okay, if we convert $400,000 this year, that money can move into a Roth and start growing tax-free. But that conversion will be counted as ordinary income, which will likely push you into the 24% federal tax bracket. So the tax bill might be $90,000 or even more depending on state taxes. And at that point, there are really only two ways to pay that tax. The first is using assets outside of your IRA, like cash or money from the brokerage account. So if you do that, the full $400,000 will go into the Roth and every dollar will benefit from tax-free compounding. That's the most efficient structure. And the other option is paying the tax from the conversion itself through tax withholding. If you convert $400,000, you immediately withhold $90,000 for tax, so only $310,000 goes into the Roth to grow tax-free. At first glance, that might not seem like a big deal, but over time it does become significant because that $90,000 would have been compounding tax-free inside of a Roth IRA for decades. And over a 20-plus year retirement, that gap can easily turn into well over $200,000 or more of lost growth. And that's the part that most people overlook. The real power of a Roth conversion is the uninterrupted compounding inside the Roth. So when you reduce the amount up front with tax withholding, you weaken the strategy from the start. That's why before we even talk about tax brackets or RMDs, the first question I ask is, do we have a clear way to pay the tax without disrupting the rest of the plan? If we don't, then we adjust. Maybe we convert smaller amounts, spread it out over more years, or wait entirely, because the goal isn't just to say that we did a conversion. The goal is to materially improve the overall structure of your retirement plan. So if you're within 5 years or so of retirement and you're thinking about Roth conversions, the next step isn't to guess. It's to model these decisions in advance. Because until you can clearly see the long-term impact, you don't really know if the strategy is helping or just added unneeded complexity. If you'd like help evaluating whether a Roth conversion actually strengthens your retirement plan, you can schedule a retirement strategy call with me in the link below. We'll walk through the numbers together and determine if it makes sense, and if it does, how to execute it in the right way most efficiently. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I've recorded another video right here that you can watch as well.